Captains Sarah and Shane Healy from the Salvation Army, just in case you didn't know which was which, from the Salvation Army Adelaide Congress Hall, and we are here to share with you the next stage of our discipleship experiment. For the last, how many weeks?
At least a couple of months now, 3 months I think COVID's been going on for.
Oh, far too long.
Yeah.
But we've been looking at passages of the Bible after Easter of where the disciples were growing and learning and going on their journey of discipleship after Jesus had left them. And now we're at the Acts of Pentecost. This beautiful passage, but instead of working through all these different passages, we're really going to slow down, as people always tell me to do with my speaking, slow down and really focus on just 5 verses. 5 verses from Acts 2:42 to 47. And that's often called what happened as the first church, and how they devoted themselves and they learned and they grew. These 3,000 believers who were saved after Peter's sermon, how did they become disciples? So we're going to look at that passage. We've got this lovely new Bible study that we've prepared.
It's been delivered out to you this weekend by our wonderful helpers, so massive thanks to them for travelling all over the city to make that happen.
They're good people. Be nice to them.
If you want a copy on that, just on sent to you via email, please let us know as well so we can make that happen.
Yeah, so look through that over the next 4 weeks. But Shane's particularly, you're stuck on that first verses, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and the breaking of bread and prayer. So what does this mean to you? What have you been thinking?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that jumped out at me was the word devoted, that they devoted themselves to that, to the apostles' teaching. Now, of course, they weren't just simply devoting themselves to Peter's, whatever came to his imagination and felt like talking about that day. It wasn't so much his teaching, but the fact that he was teaching what Christ had taught them. So there was this handing down of information. And so they devoted themselves to what Christ had taught them, all for the last 3 years that he was on this earth. Well, 33 years, but 3 years of his ministry. And what really grasped me about this was one, that they devoted themselves to this, but they were really looking for some guidance. They were looking for wisdom.
They were fresh new Christians.
Absolutely. They were looking for a whole lot of stuff that often we are looking for ourselves, and they turned to this. So they turned to what they thought could provide that for them and knew could provide that for them. And so they didn't just sort of read it once or twice, but they actually devoted themselves to that. I guess I'm labouring on that word devoted, because I'm often thinking, well, what do I actually devote myself to? You know, draw a mind map through the week of how much time you spend in certain other things, and I think you'll be quite convicted in terms of God's word and how much you devote yourselves to God's word. I know I certainly am.
So they devoted themselves to fellowship and bread and prayer and those sorts of things, but it's the teaching.
It's the teaching that really that jumped out at me. When Joshua was in the Old Testament, when Joshua was preparing as a young leader to take over from Moses, and he took the Israelites into the Promised Land, it talks about there in the first chapter of Joshua that they meditated on the word day and night.
Devoting themselves.
They devoted themselves to it. And God said to them at that stage, then you'll be strong and courageous. And he repeats this, I think, 3 times to them, to be strong and courageous. Get the point, be strong and courageous, because you've meditated on the word day and night, and because you're putting that into action.
You can be strong and courageous.
God tells them to be very careful about obeying everything that's in this word. Don't leave anything out, just do what I say in my word, and then you'll be strong and courageous. And not only that, you'll actually be successful and you'll prosper. And now everyone wants to be successful and prosper. You know, businesses, churches, individuals, we all want to be that. And how does that happen? We meditate on the word. We devote ourselves to the word, and we put that teaching into practice.
Cool.
When I was thinking about that in terms of for the Salvation Army, our first doctrine of the 11 doctrines that we have, our first doctrine is directed or led to God's word. And it talks about how the Old and the New Testament are inspired by God, and that they only constitute the divine rule of Christian faith and practice. I sort of really wondered and questioned as a minister myself, and we look at our church and we wonder, as we begin to set things back up again for people to come in again, we haven't stopped serving the community, but as people come back into worship, how do we keep God's word central to everything that we do? Yeah, it's wonderful to gather for a cup of coffee and a tea and to fellowship and to have a chat. It's wonderful to serve people. But if we're not obeying God's word fully, 100%, if we're only leaving out the parts that, become uncomfortable and doing the parts that are comfortable,
that's not devotion.
Then that's not devotion at all. And so I was really questioning myself when I was reading this. How much time do I put into God's word for my own study? And how much time does our church devote to God's word? No, we read it every Sunday, but beyond that, what else do we do? Just a question, that's all. How do we keep God's word central to everything that we do going forward? Like, we're thinking about the changes that we want to make going forward post-COVID. And so we're thinking, how does God's word play a central role in that? And not just play, but actually take and rule and, really guide and drive us in everything that we do. The last question that I sort of thought is, how do we as a church fully obey God's word? Are we willing to fully obey God's word, even in the difficult passages where we're like, oh, I don't know, I can't do that, Lord? Well, wonder what that would look like if we truly did. Would we be prosperous and successful? Would we be strong and courageous as the Salvation Army?
Because these disciples
once again
didn't stay just learning. They actually went out and they changed the world with what they had learnt and what they had seen, and they did it.
100%. When I talk about being strong and courageous, and prosperous and successful, I'm not talking about numbers. There was 12 disciples who changed the world. We don't need thousands, but we need devoted people who are willing to really be strong and courageous and really meditate on the word day and night and put that word into practice to see God's kingdom come here on earth once again. And there are many churches, Salvation Armies, that are doing that. So we celebrate with you and thank God for you guys, and for us as well. So yeah.
So as we go forward, we just encourage you to soak in that word, devote yourselves to it, think about your attitude towards it. Do the Bible study, join a group, talk about it with others, make it central to what you do and what guides you, as Shane was saying. And if it's not, come and have a chat to us about it. Let's figure out how to read it and how to explore it together.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of thinking about this, and I'm going to continue to do that over this week. But in my next video, I want to, which usually happens on a Tuesday or Wednesday, or we'd film it on a Tuesday, I want to roll out some of the stuff that we're thinking about putting into practice as a church in order to help our congregations and anyone else really get stuck into God's word and be disciples who are putting that into practice in their daily lives. So
cool. Exciting times ahead as we take this new shift in our discipleship experiment, and we be strong and courageous through focusing on his word. Until next time, we're going to say see you later and have a good week.
Yeah, no worries guys. See you guys. Thank you.